Hello Magic players, this is Jumbo Commander and today I have a deck tech for you, Ezuri Renegade Leader. And this is a special deck tech because it's very budget and I'm giving this deck away to one of my subscribers. Now the reason why Ezuri entered into my sights as a great budget alternative right now is because Commander Anthology was released and one of the decks was Guided by Nature featuring Freyalise. And yes, Freyalise is out there all foily and fancy, but also in this deck are a bunch of awesome elves, letting you pick them up on the cheap. So if you get this Guided by Nature deck, you can get rid of your Freyalise, your Song of the Dryads, your Titania, and be left with nothing but amazing elves. But even if you don't plan on getting a Commander Anthology, you can still pick up a lot of these elves for very cheap. This deck can be constructed from scratch for under $75. So let's break down this Ezuri Renegade Leader deck. This one green legendary elf warrior is extremely powerful. 1 green, regenerate another target elf. Then 2 green elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. Wow, Ezuri is a recurring overrun on a stick. This is crazy. If you have a lot of mana, you can pump it all into Ezuri and then go crazy. Then that's what this deck is trying to do. You're trying to generate a lot of mana, pump Ezuri like crazy, and make your elves unstoppable trampling machines. It's also pretty nice that Ezuri has a little bit of protection. That regenerate another target elf can be very powerful as well. So I think we're going to break this up into several categories, and one of the most important categories is mana ramp. We need tons of mana to pump into Ezuri and do a lot of other crazy shenanigans. And elves produce mana really efficiently. We have the classic 1-drops, Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves, Llanowar Elves, the slightly better Jiraga Tree Speaker, which you have to invest a little bit of mana to get a lot out. An Elvish Harbinger, which will add a mana to your mana pool, but more importantly, search up a relevant elf, and there are going to be a lot of relevant elves. Some of the most important elves in this deck are elves that tap for more than just 1 mana. Elvish Archdruid, one of the best elves in this deck. 1 green for a 2/2. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. That's great. We want to go wide with elves, and Anthem for Elves is great, but add a green to your mana pool for each elf you control. Oh, we are going wide. We're pumping them all. We're generating tons of mana. This Elvish Archdruid is insane. Priest of Titania also adds a green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield, and Wirewood Channeler does the same thing. All of these can generate stupid amounts of mana because we're going to have a lot of elves. And that's right, we're going to sink that mana straight into Ezuri and trample over our opponents. Let's not forget an interesting card, Viridian Joiner, which adds green to your mana pool equal to its power. So if you can pump Ezuri a few times, you can then tap Viridian Joiner for even more mana to pump Ezuri even more. And that's what we're getting at. Pumping Ezuri, getting tons of mana to just deploy as many elves as possible. Birchlore Ranger will let you tap any 2 elves to produce a mana, and Heritage Druid will let you tap 3 elves to produce 3 mana. We won't always have mana dorks on the battlefield. Sometimes we'll have utility elves, but being able to turn those into mana dorks is very powerful. Now we've mentioned a lot of elves that tap for incredible abilities, so let's untap them with Seeker of Skybreak. This will let you untap that Elvish Archdruid or that Priest of Titania and generate even more mana. There are other untap abilities that make this deck super powerful, like Wirewood Lodge, letting you untap an elf for just a single green. Curian Ranger, which will have you return a force to your hand. Wirewood Symbiote, which will have you return an elf to your hand, and there's some few Enter the Battlefield elves that work particularly well with Wirewood Symbiote. And also Copperhorn Scout. Not as powerful as the other ones, but this will allow you to attack with all of your elves, then it will untap them, allowing you to tap them for mana to pump them. I know that's a complicated sequence of events, but basically it allows you to have both attacking elves and elves that tap for mana, because in many cases there's going to be a tension between that. Do I tap my elves for mana to pump Ezuri, or do I attack with them Speaking of attacking, that's what we need to be doing. So let's talk about this aggro plan we have going on. And one of the best cards that just is a great example of this aggro plan is Imperious Perfect. This 3-mana 2/2 says other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. It's an anthem. That's exactly what we want in this category. But also, it's an elf token producer. Green, tap, create an elf warrior creature token. This is what we want to do. We want to go wide, and then we want to pump them up. Let's explore other creature cards that might not be as good as Imperious Perfect, but fit this strategy really well. Wirewood Hivemaster will create an insect. That's not ideal, because Ezuri's going to be pumping elves only. And even though going wide with insects can be another interesting strategy, it doesn't exactly help our core strategy. Same thing goes with Caller of the Claw, which will put bears onto the battlefield, Wolf Skull Shaman, who will put wolves onto the battlefield, and Ren's Run Packmaster, which will also create wolf creature tokens. Now, we need to go wide no matter what, and so we will have a few of these in our deck anyways, but they're not ideal because all of our synergies are based around elves. I do want to mention that Caller of the Claw is very important because it'll allow us an insurance policy in case our elves get board wiped. We can replace them with bears. That's a great replacement. Moving on, Dwynen's Elite will add another elf to the battlefield. Ixalan Huntmaster will give you an elf every time you play an elf. Yes, that's what we want. And Elvish Promenade will put a green elf creature token on the battlefield for each elf you control, doubling up the elves. Now that we've gone wide with elves, let's pump them up. Dwynen will give them +1/+1 and also give us a little bit of life gain. Cultivator of Blades will give us a crazy boost. We're going to make sure to put the counters on Cultivator of Blades. We don't need servos. We need to pump our elves. Elvish Champion is a great ability, pumping up your elves, giving them Forest Walk, and Oran Reef the Vastwood will put a counter on all of the elves that enter the battlefield. We don't only want to go wide, we also want to just plain old go big. Jagged Scar Archers, Heedless One, and Drove of Elves all will get as big as the number of elves we possess. And cards like Titania's Chosen and Elvish Vanguard will get bigger as we commit more and more elves to the battlefield. It's good to have some flexible aggression too. Timberwatch Elf and Immaculate Magistrate will let us target whatever elf gets through and make them a huge threat. Timberwatch Elf reads, tap, target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of elves on the battlefield. Very cool. And then Immaculate Magistrate does the same thing, but with +1/+1 counters. Just imagine the synergy with cards like Wirewood Lodge or the other untappers, allowing us to make one huge threat at instant speed. This is crazy powerful. There's also a few cards that can get really big really fast. Chameleon Colossus, technically an elf, can double up its power over and over and over again. I also want to mention a few other sort of shapeshifter cards, Adaptive Automaton and Metallic Mimic. I honestly think you should wait on these cards. Adaptive Automaton is very good and would belong in the self deck, but I really think it's going to be reprinted in Commander 2017 and it's going to be under $1. So wait on that, and also wait on Metallic Mimic. It's in standard, it's a little bit too expensive. Just wait. These guys will be all-stars in your tribal deck, but not at this exact moment. Along with waiting, look forward to some of the other cool shapeshifters that they could put out in Commander 2017. I honestly think that even if elves aren't even a tiny part of the Commander set, there will be shapeshifters and cards that work amazing in this type of synergy. So feel free to tinker around with a few of the slots and open it up for some new Commander 2017 cards. Now we have an elf army. Let's make it relevant. Ronus's Monument can get a lot of damage in just by playing a few creature spells over and over again. There are many situations where you will empty your hand and you might as well be able to get in a lot of damage. Not to mention this is a mono green deck, and even though there's a lot of cards that just cost a single green, the cost reduction of this monument can be really valuable. Throne of the God Pharaoh is an untested card that I find very interesting. There's a lot of elves in here that can tap for mana or little abilities. It's going to be very interesting to be able to have the reach to be able to tap your team for one ability and then do a lot of damage. I also like the ability that you can attack an open player, but still deal damage to all of your opponents too. But the real card that we want to make our team relevant is Beastmaster's Ascension. This will just give our creatures +5/+5 so easily. There's no way we're not getting 7 or more quest counters on this thing. It's going to make all of your elves crazy. Then you invest a little bit of mana in Ezuri, and suddenly you have +8/+8 and trample. Very, very few decks are going to be able to hold up to that elf onslaught. There's one more card that can go big with all of these elves, and that's Draga Warcaller. Multi-kicker is a huge investment, but they will anthem your elves for every +1/+1 counter on it. That's huge. In the late game, we can sink a lot of mana into Draga Warcaller and then just make your elves insane. Not to mention the very interesting interaction with Immaculate Magistrate. You can stack those +1/+1 counters on your Draga Warcaller and just watch as your opponents crumble. Now, this deck is undoubtedly powerful, but it's also very all-in. It's not a safe strategy. You have to commit so many elves to the board. You have to dump your hand and then hope to win through combat. You need a backup plan and you need some safety. One of the best ways to be safe is to have plenty of card draw. You need to have momentum. If you're playing 1/1s for 1, you need to be able to draw some more cards late in the game. So Masked Admirers, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and Soul of the Harvest can get you back into the game as you're playing out dinky elves over and over again. Let's keep going. Lead the Stampede can have you drawing up to 5 creature cards. That's if you're lucky. Sometimes this is just a green divination, and sometimes you whiff. It can be very powerful, especially if you have a really high creature count. In the tapped out list, this has over 40 creatures, which means that you're going to be hitting quite a bit. Sylvan Messenger also has this lucky hit mentality in it. It's 4 mana for a 2/2 trample, but it'll let you look at the top 4 cards of your library and put all elf cards into your hand. Now, you can very regularly draw 2 off of a Sylvan Messenger. If you have enough elves, this card is insane. But it's also risky because you can whiff pretty easily. Many of you might prefer the safer Shamanic Revelation. For 5, you draw a card for each creature you control. Yeah, this is good. And if you've happened to pump them, or maybe you have a few anthems on the battlefield, you can gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Now, you might be thinking, this is not a very safe card. This is a card that gets you forward when you're already winning. And you're absolutely right. Shamanic Revelation only does something when you have creatures on the battlefield already. And sometimes when you need card draw, you've had your board wiped. You need to come back from behind. That's why I think it's really important to run some additional cards like Heroic Intervention that can protect you from that board wipe, or that Caller of the Claw I mentioned earlier, which will replace your elves with bears. Another really good strategy to avoid board wipes or getting blown out is Yeva Nature's Herald. Allowing you to play at instant speed can let you deploy your elves and then attack the very next turn without anyone having an opportunity to blow you out. Also, you can try different strategies. I threw in Well-Wisher because it's just a really powerful card, allowing you to gain a bunch of life. But there are additional optional strategies that can also work in decks like this. You don't always have to be attacking. You could throw in an infinite mana combo. You could throw in an ability to gain a bunch of life. Heck, you could throw in Aetherflux Reservoir and try and go off by casting a bunch of elves in the single turn. What I'm saying is you don't have to be all in. You can customize your deck. But for every elf you take out, the synergies go down. So there's some tension in the deck building here. It's very interesting, fascinating. So I want to talk about adding some cash to this deck. This is very budget. You can get the whole thing for under $75. Go ahead and check the tapped out list in the description. But if you want to add a little bit of money, let me show you the best places to put it. Most elves are pretty budget. They've been reprinted a few times and they can easily fit in this deck. But a few have missed it, costing more than $10. Eladamri is one of them. Eladamri gives all your elves Forest Walk. Could be relevant, but most importantly, it gives them Shroud. They can't be target of spells or abilities. There are a lot of single elves in this deck that are very powerful, much more powerful than the others, that Imperious Perfect I mentioned, or more importantly, the Heritage Druid, or the Elvish Archdruid, or your Priest of Titania. Heck, even your Ezuri, he can't regenerate himself. So giving your elves Shroud can be very valuable, allowing you to actually sort of combo out and kill your opponent. It's also not irrelevant that it gives your elves Forest Walk. Song of the Dryads is a card that I've cut for budget reasons, but could easily make it into the deck. Getting rid of your opponent's problem permanent and making a forest, and then having all your elves gain Forest Walk. Oh, the synergy is there. Not to mention Elvish Champion also gives them Forest Walk. Eladamri does have a downside. Shroud means that you can't work on your tapping synergies because many of your elves target other elves, and Shroud is not hexproof. So play Eladamri at your own risk. I think it's worthwhile, even though it's a nombo in some situations. Another card that's very powerful but a little bit expensive is Fauna Shaman. This elf copy of Survival of the Fittest will let you pitch your dumb elves, and you do have some dumb elves, and get the powerful elves you need. Do you see how Eladamri and Fauna Shaman perform similar functions? They protect or get your awesome elves, sometimes at the cost of your not so awesome elves. Very powerful cards. But let's get even bigger. If we're going to be producing a lot of mana, how about we Genesis Wave out our entire deck? Yes, unfortunately Genesis Wave is a little bit of money, but it's one of the most fun things to do. You have so many permanents and you can produce so much mana. It's just great to Genesis Wave everything out. And if you're doing that, you kind of also want another expensive card, Concordant Crossroads. In my high budget version of this deck, it's really fun to just Genesis Wave everything out. Oops, I hit my Concordant Crossroads, everything has haste, and then suddenly you're killing your opponents in a single go. The haste adds another level of protection, and when you're making a big play, you want to end the game right there and not give anyone else an opportunity to untap or cast another spell. Another very powerful way to end the game is Craterhoof Behemoth. It's just a bigger, badder Ezuri, and it can also be easily fetched with natural order. This is what you're used to seeing in many of the powerful legacy versions of elves. You natural order away a crappy elf you don't care about, and then boom, Craterhoof Behemoth has won the game. Finally, I have 3 upgrades in the form of lands: Mutavault, Gaia's Cradle, and Cavern of Souls. Mutavault is very simple and not very flashy. It's a land drop that adds to your elf count. Just really solid. Gaia's Cradle is super expensive, super awesome, and very flashy. It will let you add so much green to your mana pool, and big mana is what you want. This is one pretty big investment, but it is a very powerful land. Lastly, we have Cavern of Souls. This is very meta dependent, but because we have critical elves we need on the battlefield, it would suck to have them countered. So Cavern of Souls gives us that extra level of protection, but at the cost of a bunch of dollars. So it might not be for everyone. That has been my Ezuri Renegade leader deck. It goes wide with elves, it vomits its hand on the battlefield, it pumps mana into Ezuri, and it tramples over your opponents. It's a very fun and synergistic deck. It can be tuned to be extremely powerful, and like all tribal decks, it's poised to get a few key, interesting, synergistic tribal cards from Commander 2017 and Ixalan, which is rumored to have a lot of cool tribal synergies. So let's look forward to building some really great tribal decks in the next few months. And now to announce the winner of this Ezuri deck celebrating 6,000 subscribers. The lucky subscriber is Brent. Thank you, Brent, for commenting, and congratulations on being the winner. My condolences to everyone else, but hopefully you're enjoying this deck tech and all the other videos I put out. I'm really grateful for all of the wonderful comments and really all of the subscribers, so thank you, thank you. This has been Jumbo Commander, and if you want to see more videos, go ahead and click that subscribe button because there are more on the way. If you want to get in touch with me directly, @Jumbo Commander is my Twitter handle. And if your name is Brent and you need to contact me about getting your free Ezuri deck, you can email me jumbocommander@gmail.com. I love hearing from you guys. It was great playing against many of you in Vegas. I had a blast and I'm really excited to keep making more videos about Commander. See you guys next Wednesday.